Our disability is our greatest strength. It gives us a supervision to see the issues facing humanity from a more inclusive perspective and the grit to fight back against all odds. Welcome to Super Adaptables, the More Than Walking Video podcast discussion. Welcome to Super Adaptables, the podcast where people of all abilities gather to discuss pressing issues that affect the disability community and their implications for the world at large. I'm your host, Corey Pheez, C4 complete quadriplegic since 2005, hailing from the great state of Connecticut. We are recording this on Tuesday, February 17th, 2026, and today I'll be interviewing Carina Ho, aka ONIKHO or ONIKHO?
ONIKHO.
ONIKHO, on the topic of singing a new song while dancing differently. This year, I'm going to be meeting with other super adaptables who are and have persevered following their spinal cord injuries and pushed forward, creating not only a lane for themselves, but also sharing a path for others to follow. Carina Ho is a Taiwanese-American electronic musician, composer, and dancer that creates work under the moniker ONIKHO. A former professional dancer with Axis Dance Company, Carina often blends music, dance, and film to advocate for authentic and positive representation of disabled bodies in the arts. She has toured through the U.S. and internationally, most recently composing music for a Taiwanese physically integrated dance company. Also a Fulbright Scholar, Carina researched inclusive dance education and was a guest lecturer at the Dance Conservatory SODRE in Montevideo, Uruguay. She is based in Berkeley, California. Carina, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
But before we jump into the interview, I want to remind everyone that Super Adaptables now has an exclusive series recorded in 2025 called Dreaming of America, where we examine social safety net programs in the United States, ranging from your typical Medicaid, Medicare, and social security benefits to constitutional principles such as due process and freedom of the press. We discuss with experts on how recent changes and challenges to these social safeguards impact all of us and why these safety nets are foundational to a democracy that works for everyone. You can find all of our episodes and community discussions on these topics by scrolling back in time in your Super Adaptables podcast feed or access our expert episodes by searching for Dreaming of America wherever you listen to podcasts. Now, for me, SEI has greatly affected my life and many others in ways that are often difficult to put into words. And sure, it's easy enough to rattle off a clinical definition of what it means to be complete versus incomplete, or what level my injury occurred at. Still, the deep-seated parts of my personal experience I found needed to be felt through a universal medium, and that could be clearly understood and heard to inspire and give hope, because it was through this conduit that I found myself able to escape the reality of my own circumstances. In the disability community, especially those who are affected by an SEI, we've had our worlds turned upside down, and being paralyzed and creating a playlist of music to soothe your pain may not be high on your priority list. However, studies have shown that music therapy and musical interventions are effective, as evidenced by tools used in spinal cord injury rehabilitation to enhance physical, emotional, and cognitive recovery. So it's no secret that music provides so much more than a good beat and great vibes. In the words of the 19th century German Jewish poet Bertold Auerbach, music washes away from the soul the dust of everyday life. And so, Carina, I'm so excited to talk to you about the impact music has had on your life and how you, in turn, are making music for the world. So, Carina, back to you. So please take us through how you became injured and what did it feel like when you first picked up an instrument again after your injury? And what challenges did you face when you got restarted?
I was injured in 2014 in a car accident. So I'm a T3 complete spinal cord injury. I was with almost my whole immediate family. We were on a family road trip going down south actually up north from the southern part of California up back to the Bay Area, which is where I live. And on the freeway, we were rear-ended by a semi-truck. And so my mother passed away in that event, and my stepfather has a traumatic brain injury, and I have a spinal cord injury. So, as you can imagine, it was a really catastrophic event, and just like you said, upended my entire life. I was 26 at the time, so just
Wow.
in the throes of, being my young adult self, and just everything
Yeah.
suddenly came to a sudden, for a very rude awakening. So yeah, it was extremely painful and difficult, as it is for anyone going through a spinal cord injury. And when I first came back to music, so I grew up playing the piano, and in my young adult years, I would play in bands as a keyboardist, as a vocalist, and it was always just a hobby for me. I always had these kind of rock star dreams, maybe a little bit of a diva vibe, but I never thought of it as like a full-time thing. It was just, but I had recently been released from the hospital. I still had my giant neck brace on, just weeks out of the injury, out of the ER. And my family had brought down my electric piano. They had cleared out my apartment, which was not accessible, and brought some of my stuff down. And so when they finally brought it down, I remember wheeling up to my piano and just playing it for the first time. And it was so stiff, and my legs no longer could really fit under the piano. Like,
Mm.
everything changed, every detail. So the piano itself just wasn't really easy to play anymore. But I remember playing those first few chords, and it just felt like I was able to channel this deep-seated pain that I think many of us can relate to, this deep-seated grief that you can't put in words. And so just going back to a medium that was so important to me throughout my life, and that was kind of a major form of my self-expression, it just was like the cathartic release that I needed to start my grieving process.
Indeed. And, right off the bat, I see the first aspect of like, man, this is something I've sat in front of, I've done countless times, and now I'm having trouble even just tapping the keys and whatnot. You're out of tune, out of sync, out of whack, in those given moments, And I think when we talk about paralysis and like a previous skill set we might have had, trying to return to it is just never super easy. Even if you have upper body control and what have you, just trying to manipulate, like you said, with the keys, and just even trying to roll up to it, it wasn't accessible. So you're already probably starting to brainstorm about how can I continue doing this, you know, at a high level as it was before. So it's pretty cool. What do you remember the first thing you like were able to play?
Um, I don't know. I think probably some really sad. I describe my music as sad girl music. It just felt really just good to play, just some good minor chords. So I don't remember exactly what I played, but early on was when I wrote the first song for this.
Okay.
Now, like, ONIKHO is this project that I started post injury, and I wasn't really a songwriter before. I didn't really create music as a solo musician, and
Mhm.
so it was kind of in these early days where I started to really just think about music, and in terms of what it felt, what I needed at the time, which was using music to express grief. And that sort of eventually grew into this project that I have today.
Awesome. You had mentioned about like your apartment, which wasn't accessible. How did you, what was the workaround to get it to a place where, you felt comfortable, maneuvering through it?
Well, unfortunately, I had to move out. I was living with
Mm.
two other roommates. And so I ended up moving in with some family members. We had to get a one-bedroom apartment because the Bay Area is very expensive. And so at one point, there were like five of us living in one bedroom. It was not very comfortable, but when you're in crisis, you just do whatever you need to do.
Yeah, I can remember in the beginning, when I got discharged from the hospital after 5 months rehabilitating, returning back to my parents' home and just living in the living room with all of my boxes and medical supplies. And it was not comfortable because there was just all this vulnerability. Prior to that, like, I can't say things weren't any different because I was in the Navy. So I lived on the ship and it's very cramped and close quarters there. So the vulnerable aspect you still see, but at least you can like tuck your stuff away when you want to. Um, and you don't have to, at least you're in control of your privacy, I would say.
Yes. I think we have to deal with maybe a feeling of loss of dignity in the beginning because,
Mm,
as we all know, there's bathroom things, there's a lot of, we need help, more help. And so just really having to lay down your becoming so humble, but it's hard, especially when you're an adult and you're used to, you were in the Navy and my sister was in the Navy. And so she, like I can understand what kind of life that was. And so, yeah, a lot of, a lot of things have to be overcome, especially on those initial first years. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Shout out to your sister. She chose the right branch, for sure.
Very proud.
Um, so you said, in reading like just up on you, you have a very, very like cool career path and all that you've been involved in. You know, what role does music play before your life and after, in addition to the dance aspect?
Well, I also grew up dancing. My mom is a very kind of typical immigrant Chinese mom who just was like, you need to be in all the cultural things, the ballet class, the piano class, because I think to Asian parents, that's what makes, I mean, for a lot of parents, not just Asian parents, but that's what makes a well-rounded kid. But you're never supposed to choose those pathways as a career. They're always just meant to
Mm,
be your hobbies. Um, and so I had dance training, I had music training, but never considered making them a thing. But after my injury, I think my mother was no longer there to be like, no, don't, you need a serious career in, corporate America.
yeah.
I kind of fell into Axis Dance Company. A dancer friend of mine who was not disabled was like, have you ever heard of this dance company? They have dancers in wheelchairs and dancers, with missing limbs, and it's pretty cool. You should check them out. And so I connected with the artistic director at the time, and she invited me in to, observe a class. And honestly, it was really hard. I took a ballet class with them, and I almost left because it was just so painful to see myself in a wheelchair trying to do
Mm,
ballet when I knew what I used to look like, what it used to feel like in my body, which was awesome. Um, but after I left, she actually wrote to me and was like, "Would you like to be an apprentice for 6 months? We have funding to bring you on." And so that became my kind of like part-time job. And this was still very early on. I think I was 8 months post-injury. So I started as an apprentice. I did some touring with the company. I learned some of their choreography, and eventually became a full-time company member. And so I unknowingly became a professional dancer. It was my full-time job at that point, and at the same time was developing my music outside of dance. And when I thought to make a music video, I wanted to incorporate dance because that was the thing I knew best. And I had all these dancer friends that I could now cast into my music videos, and all these dancer friends with different kinds of bodies. And that's when dance and music started to overlap for me.
cool. Now, as far as like hearing about this company, and which I think is amazing, it's nearly 40 years old. It began in 1987. And when I think about the dancing aspect, it made me think a lot about when I got married. And, at the wedding, one of the most traditional things you do is that opening dance, right? And me and my wife didn't choreograph it beforehand. She was just like, how are we gonna do it? I said, just sit on my chair and I'm just gonna take it from there. So she got on my lap and I literally just spun around for the duration of the song. I can't remember the song when I think about it, but spinning and moving and keeping rhythm and figuring out times to just kind of go off script in the dance for 2.5, 3 minutes is not easy to do. It's very challenging. And so for you, was it like you had to build up like body strength to be able to, hold certain poses and whatnot? Because dance is very powerful, the movements and what have you. Can you talk a little bit about like how it was physically on you?
I mean, there was a reason why I left and that's because it was so physically demanding. But when I first started, it was like probably the best form of physical therapy because it just challenged me to move my body in ways, because it's a creative art form. A lot of times in the studio, I would be with, if we were developing new choreography, I would be paired up with someone not in a wheelchair, someone who's totally able-bodied, or someone missing a leg. And the choreographer would be like, well, can you figure out a combination where two of you are touching elbows all the time, but you do this, and they would give us all these conditions. So we'd have to figure it out. Two people with different bodies, and it just pushed me in ways that physical therapists didn't. I think in our medical model, healthcare system, if you're injured, if you have something like paralysis, they sort of give up on you. They say, here are the skills you need to live, but they don't challenge you to do more than that. And I think being in this place, I was challenged to do more than that. And so I think I credit that to making me, kind of the strong, still relatively flexible person I am today. But that being said, it was risky. I definitely injured myself a lot. There was one move where a dancer would stand on top of my shoulders with me in the chair. And we would do like all these
What?
like risky, kind of cool trick acrobatic things. But I tipped over backwards and like smacked my head on the floor.
Oh
Um,
my gosh.
yeah. So, like at a certain point, it's not quite worth the risk, especially as you are, you age. At that point, I was like already I turned 30. I was like, no, I'm good. I don't need another spinal cord injury. But I think for the time I was there, it was great.
Wow. And was that type of move, was that out of let's just do something wild and creative and spontaneous? Or was it like a misunderstanding of, okay, well, I don't want to limit you in what you do, so let's try this.
It was, let's try this. A lot of the company did, because there aren't a lot of other companies that do that. It's like we had to just try things. Otherwise, you just limit yourself. And so it was a lot of experimentation. Not all of it went well.
I bet, I bet. Um, so as an artist with a disability, what have been your biggest obstacles you've dealt with? Whether that's, self-doubt, prejudice, fear, etc. And have you ever been supported by social safety net programs like Medicaid, SSI, SSDI, or vocational rehab? And before you answer that, it made me think about how you said that your mom, you know, the influence about from a cultural aspect, you do this right here, um, and you don't do that. This is just something you try out, you fill out, but what you really need to do is make sure that you're getting a good job, you're going to have good income. How much of her voice kind of like was a part of like maybe some of the obstacles you dealt with early on?
Oh, good questions. Um, let's start. Maybe I'll start with your first question
Sure.
before I forget them. Well, in the beginning, SSI, SSDI, that support helped me get back on my feet. I was only 26 at the time, so I didn't have that much money in my bank account, and I
Right.
couldn't work. My sister, because it was most of my immediate family, a lot of us had to stop working. Um,
Mm.
so yeah, definitely super, super important. I feel really lucky to be in the Bay Area where it's very accessible, especially because the civil rights for disability rights movement started in Berkeley, where I live now. So the
Yep.
community, there's a really strong disability community and a lot of resources. For example, right now I'm in the office of this local adaptive sports organization called BORP. And I found them early on, and that helped me just like get my ass out to do exercise and meet other people. So just all these things helped me kind of regain confidence in myself. But I would say confidence was probably my biggest setback because, as I think a lot of us know, that you don't see a lot of folks with disabilities out doing their thing. Like, especially when I was first injured, I thought my life was over. I was like, well, I'm just gonna sit in a retirement home and just drool on myself. Like it was a very unfortunately ableist perception, but I just didn't know.
Right.
So yeah, I think not seeing any other artists, not seeing any other performers, like especially in the music space, who look like me. Sometimes I'm like, are people gonna think I'm like cringe for trying to do this, or when I'm on stage, will people think I'm cringe and just doing this for the optics because she's in a wheelchair. And so it took a while for me to just come into myself and be like, no, I actually have a message. I'm actually a unique artist because not a lot of artists have my lived experience. And I think being with Access really helped because a lot of what we did was we did educational assemblies. And so we would go to different schools and do a little like, routine for kids. And the difference in how kids treated us when we first walked in, which was like, whoa, who are they? Just kind of like, what's going on? To like, whoa, like, can we get your autograph? Like that, I think that shift is incredible. Just a little exposure, a little positive exposure, can have a lasting impact. And that's when I saw like, okay, there's some value to this. Um, I'm sorry, I forgot your second part. Your second question.
Oh, just about like part of that that self-doubt, was it kind of like the words of your mom echoing, in your mind, just like, okay, Corinne, Karina, what are you doing? Why are you allowing that man or that woman to step on your shoulders? This is kind of why you shouldn't be doing that. You should be, working in the tech sector or doing something that's going to really be more stable.
Well, it's funny because I actually do work in tech.
Uh,
um, but yeah, I mean, I do hear her voice. I actually think she would be proud of how far I've come, how I've created something from nothing, just like you have. Um, I think on the other hand, being able to, unfortunately, because she passed away, it freed me a little bit from her
mm,
voice. And so it allowed me to just dive into the arts and be like, this is what I enjoy doing. I think this is what I'm best at. And so I'm just going to give it a try.
yeah, that's very true. You know, I felt like growing up and doing music and hip hop, sometimes like my dad, because he's from Jamaica and whatnot, so I'm the child of an immigrant as well, and he's very just, he's serious. I love him and I take after him a lot, but his views on music, I don't share all of them, but I can see where he comes from in his thought process. But after I got injured, it was kind of like the same, not just ableist mindset, because I quit. I just said, you know what? Like, what am I doing? Everything I aspire to, want in life in terms of, money, cars, pleasurable company and stuff. All of that just did not fit the moniker of a hip hop artist. And I started saying to myself, like, what am I going to be talking about? But then I just reevaluated myself and I said, wow, like you're super shallow and materialistic. Because if that's the only content you can come up with and be creative, then maybe you shouldn't be doing it. And there's always a different path. And so that's when I started changing the subject content, what I wrote, and just being very candid on all of my projects and stuff to the point where in the beginning, a lot of people would say, man, you're nice. Like, you're good. You're better than half of the people walking. I was like, wow, I was good when I was walking. It doesn't make me extra good because I'm paralyzed and what have you. I'm just talking about something different that I think at the end of the day, when you finish um, going to a concert and you live vicariously through your favorite song that a person runs on their set, you're back to those same basic issues. How am I going to put food on the table? How am I going to um, provide for myself, in retirement? what happens to me if I do get disabled? Let's say you're just a fan and you're just able-bodied. So those are real things that go through all of our minds. And I think having that same lived experience of, I know what it was like walking. I know what it's like being paralyzed. I know what it is to not have at all and be very broke. As a, when I got hurt, I was 22, very little money in my bank account, et cetera. I had a career path going towards, but trying to make better decisions to a place where like I'm comfortable and I can provide for my family. Um, and I'm doing things that are more meaningful and impactful. And I wonder if you share some of that when you think about like, okay, at 26, when you could reflect back and say, I was doing this, now I am here. Do you ever feel that way?
Yeah, I think it goes both ways. There's like, oh man, life used to be so easy, and
Yeah.
man, life is so hard now. But then also, kind of similarly to you, also we were so young. Young people will be silly and idealistic. I didn't know what it meant to lose. I didn't know what it meant to struggle. And therefore, I think the depth of my just lived experience, it was like it was also shallow. Like I grew up middle class. Um I never went a day in my life, hungry. And so there was only so much that I knew about the world. And now I feel like I've gained, I mean, I don't wish this injury on anyone, and it's definitely a very challenging one to have. But I would say I gained so much wisdom and just depth as a human. Like if you talk to
Mm.
me when I was 26 versus now, I'm sure I'm a lot more interesting, a lot more empathetic, just a lot probably better of a person, honestly. So yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. Um, Kind of like on a same vein in terms of going back to the being supported by the social safety net programs and stuff. And we've seen recently in the news, and it's not about a political discussion per se, but it's just about the artist's role in everyday society. When I think about our bards, so I'm very much into like fantasy novels and things of that nature. And there's always that one person who sings the story of what is going on and what's happening in the world and all of its current events, good, bad, or indifferent. So should artists or musicians or other creatives use their platforms to address political and social issues? If so, how do you go about doing that?
I mean, I think it's a choice. Not everyone's art is about that. I think art is very important in terms of social and political things. I think for me, I don't as much feel like I'm have any sort of authority to weigh in on political things, but in social issues, especially for, when it comes to representation and not just about disability, just about, positive visibility for humans. Absolutely. I think that artists have a really important role because I think when you see how different like marginalized groups have been portrayed throughout time, they gain a favorable light in the mainstream when art gives them that favorable light, like
Mm,
I think about, I'm just going to use a really shallow example, but certain models that used to just be white twiggy women, and then you would see these really artistic photo shoots of women with like pigmentation things that would have been
yeah,
considered, you know, really weird.
freckles.
Yeah, freckles.
Yeah.
But you take an artist like to make it beautiful, to show people the beauty. And I think that's the artist's role, is to show people the beauty.
Mm, as well said. Yeah, I agree with that. Um, and I think, what I don't like about it is, well, I guess I like it and I don't like it. One, I think it exposes the bias sometimes in people, whereas like you can look at an entertainer or artist and you just say, well, your job is just to entertain us. You're not supposed to weigh in. But at the end of the day, again, you put down the guitar, you unplug the piano, you unplug the microphone, and what are you? You're a human who still has to deal with those things and contend with them on a daily basis. And so your biggest platform, especially if you're influential, um, should be utilized to weigh in on some of those things that you find important, because oftentimes when you see at like a political rally, what do? They're trying to rally up people and they're using music. It's not dead. It's not silent. It's not anything. They're using some form of song. Sometimes it's dance, and it's reflective of whatever their campaign is trying to represent. And it's channeling their message that's relatable all across the board. So when people do weigh in on those subjects and it's looked at like, no, don't do that, or like an athlete that says something that maybe not be favorable, it's like, wait a minute, whether you're Republican, Democrat, Independent, you probably wear a pair of Nikes. At some point in time, maybe you're going on a run or whatever the case is, or when you're just thinking about, a different campaign slogan, you might run through a playlist of sorts and say, I think this would fit well with our messaging. So yeah, I do think that, as artists, we definitely have a role. This final question I'm going to ask, and then I want to get into, your music and what have you. So, you talked a little bit about like how it was a little bit troubling going back to the keyboard and feeling stiff. And I imagine you have on the neck brace and what have you. What are some ways that newly injured musicians or general hobbyists can get involved in music specifically? How does one adapt beyond the injury? Vocal projection, playing the piano without the use of your feet to sustain notes, that type of thing. And like, yeah, like how do you do that?
Oh, I have so many tricks. Well, when it comes to some instruments are hard to adapt. I'll just say that. Playing the violin, which I used to do, it's hard to do when you don't have a lot of core support. The piano is a great instrument because there are electric pianos. They're smaller, they're lighter. I actually started to learn music production when I was, in the early days. I spent a lot of time in bed. Like I didn't even have enough energy to sit at the piano for very long, and
Mm,
I had no clue what music production is. And for those who don't know, music producers use software to basically compose music. Um,
yeah,
and so you use programs. GarageBand is a really sort of entry level one, and then there's more sophisticated programs. But if you know GarageBand, it's kind of an idea of what it is.
yeah.
I would say that's kind of where I got my entry into music productions because I could sit in bed with my computer. You can buy they call them a little MIDI keyboard that you just run through your computer, and it opens up a huge palette of tools that you can do wherever you are. You could be lying down. You don't need to carry a lot of heavy stuff. And so I would really recommend that as a great entry point, especially if you're recovering, you're bored. Maybe you want to learn some music. So the sustain pedal, my friend actually created, it only works for electric pianos, but he created a bite switch that you
Um,
plug in. It was just, I think he just bought it at the like electronics store, but he attached it to a plug where it plugged into the sustain jack of my piano, and I just trigger it by biting. And so
wow.
there's a lot of, if you're really interested in, I mean, I've seen people play the cello with their toes. Like, I think just creativity and just the willingness to adapt and change your art form to fit your current body goes so long. I mean, I have a lot more, but yeah.
No, I mean that's really dope to know. So just like you, um, prior to it, I just always focused just on artistry. So it's just, writing songs, and just getting in front of the microphone and being able to record. So not so much on the production side. However, once I got hurt, an associate of mine, he showed me how to use Fruity Loops. And it's a doll for like those who don't understand. It's just the same thing as Karina's speaking about with GarageBand, Fruity Loops, Pro Tools, Ableton, Cubase, all of these different um, forms of software that you can use, and you literally have a digitalized keyboard, and you can input into that keyboard piano, violin, saxophone, all various types of instruments. You don't have to worry about sustaining chords. You just kind of click and drag. And you can come up with really fascinating arrangements that, you know, if you previously were doing that line of work, now you're able to do it. And for me, what was hard because I'm a quadriplegic. So it's like I can't use my hands at all. So it's like, how do you do it? And so with this mouse, I have a trackball mouse that I was looking at the box of Dragon Actually Speaking software, and a guy was sitting down, and it was like a lamp stand, but it was all silhouette. And this lampstand was in front of him. And I'm like, if I could make something like that, attach a mouse and put my mouth on it, I probably could move the mouse around and be kind of proficient in that. Because other than that, it would be, mouse grid, 3, 2, 4, click drag. And you can't do quarter notes, 6 notes, 8 notes. You can't do that with it. It's just too hard. But with this, I assign it. I can hold it down, drag, and move things. And so with many of my albums, I've been able to do the bulk of the production, which has been cost saving, and it's been a challenge because like I'm learning music theory through it. So yeah, you're absolutely right about just the music production piece. And I love your music. It is
Thank
super
you.
dope.
Thank you.
Super dope. I
Made out of
like,
collab.
yeah, oh, I would
I've
love
been
to.
looking for a hip hop artist for a long time.
I got you. I got you. Let me know.
I'm gonna write you some bars that you can.
Oh no, oh no. See, we can't do that in hip hop.
Oh no,
You make the beat. I'll write the
yeah,
lyrics.
but no, sorry, I'm not gonna write you. I'm not gonna. I didn't mean to write the lyrics. I'm gonna produce you something. That's what I meant to say.
That'd be fire. I'm always looking for dope producers, and you are definitely a dope producer.
Thank you.
So, I want to get into a couple of your songs so you can kind of have the opportunity to expound on the meaning of them because they're very like it's surreal. When I listen to it, I'm just like grooving and I'm trying to get the interpretations right. So two songs that um I picked out that I just really want to know the meaning behind, and also one of the lyrics. So Doodoo Dang, I want to make sure I'm saying that right.
Yo
Um,
Dang.
Doodoo Dang and Rodeo Pantheon. And when you explain the meaning behind it, tell me about the lyrics. Give me something beautiful to quiet my mind and hear my voices.
Well, Yo Dang, I'll start with that one. That's a Taiwanese folk song.
Okay.
And it was actually, I learned that it was a bit of a resistance song because Taiwan used to be a Japanese colony. And when the Japanese were kind of present, they banned the use of indigenous languages. Because I don't know if people know, but there are a lot of Aboriginal groups in Taiwan.
Right.
And so Dio Dang, like the lyrics are all sort of like onomatopoeias about like a train going through a mountain. It's like almost like chugga 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 chugga. So it wasn't technically in their native language, but it was an ability for them to sing something for them, despite this rule that they couldn't speak, quote unquote, their language. So it was like a little bit of a workaround. And so it became, it's just like a very traditional song that I decided to take. My mother taught it. It was the last song my mom taught to me before she passed away. So it also has a personal meaning. And I just, my style, it's kind of like very mellow, laid back electronic music. And
Yeah,
so I
yeah, it's
just
real
wanted to take
cool.
that song and make it mine. And the other
Right.
one, Radio Pantheon, I wrote when I started taking antidepressants, and I felt kind of numb. I don't know if anyone's ever experienced that, but when you're feeling depressed for a long time and you take some SSRIs and it sort of just brings you from -5 back to 0, you're like,
Yeah.
why do I feel the absence of sadness? And it's a little bit disquieting, and but it also helped to kind of like, yeah, quiet sort of like the negativity that I was feeling all the time. So
Mhm.
Rodeo with Pantheon is kind of just about that like numb feeling when I first started. Yeah.
For those who will go and watch the video, you have these like puppets going on. Can you tell me about like the thought process behind, the puppets and whatnot?
Yeah, so when I created the music video, I was inspired by Chinese shadow puppetry. It's like a traditional art
Yep,
form.
yep.
And so I just created a little story about a cat based on my own cat, and a dog. And the dog is sort of going into this, being taken into this other world, led by the cat.
Mhm.
And I don't know, it's just a bit silly, but I kind of wanted to give it some trippy visuals.
No, I like it. I dig it. I was like, I watched it probably like 6, 7 times.
Whoa, okay.
Yeah, I was like really in tune
Racking up
to
my
it.
views.
Of course, hey, why not? But no, I mean, I took a thorough listen to like just everything that you've done, from the Murder Massacre song, the 4 a.m. Like I really took a deep dive into it and wanted to tap into what it looks like for you because you brought up a couple things within even that Doo Doo Dong song that kind of relates to about speaking about political and social issues, right? So I think in America, we tend to we talk about like Native Americans being removed from their homelands and pushed away, and their language being taken from them, and the colonization of um, different countries in Africa, and languages being removed, and those who are descendants, that ability to know what your ancestral language, how it was spoken, is removed in many cases. And so you don't have that. And there's this loss of identity. I think it all ties into paralysis because through paralysis, you're losing your identity. And if you are a ethnic minority, you then feel like, man, now not only have I lost my physical independence, but I come from a culture where it has lost a lot of independence. So people don't think about, the Japanese colonizing Taiwan and removing your language, which, a lot of countries are so diverse in what is spoken. I watched a gentleman the other day. He was speaking Chinese, but it was a certain subset of Chinese culture that is really difficult to speak. And when he started opening his mouth, the people that were like, I think they were in a nail parlor, they looked, they said, you speak better than my daughter. But he took the time out to understand the culture, which is really dope. And so that reminds me a lot, like, you took something that is very precious and sacred, and you're putting it out there for the masses to ingest. Like that makes me, because I was like, I didn't have any time, but I was going to like translate the lyrics because I'm like, what is this song really saying? And for you to tell me that it has such a more deeper, profound meaning, like it makes me respect your music even more. You know what I mean? Because like that's a cool aspect of it. So like those lyrics and going back to Rodeo Pantheon, give me something beautiful to quiet my mind and hear my voices. What do you mean?
I mean, it's kind of the asking for something to kind of treat the pain, treat that depression. I think, especially after my injury, I think when you go through such a big trauma and you lose so much, and it affects every single aspect of your life. It's not unsurprising that one experiences depression, and
Yeah.
I didn't really know how to register it. It was just like, well, man, I feel shitty, and that's just like a part. It's because I'm going through this thing. Um, but I think, yeah, going to having a good therapist who sort of guided me through, like, well, maybe give it a try. And I was like, no, I'll muscle through it. I'll push through it. That whole like,
Yeah.
I don't want to, rely on medication. That old mindset. And I'm really glad I did, because honestly, it took that stone. I felt like I was just living life with a stone tied to
Mhm.
my heart. And there was just, not to say that everyone should hop on antidepressants anytime they feel sad, but when it's prolonged and it's chronic, yeah, like I think it helps just correct, just bring me back to zero so that I could, my head could go above water and be like, wow, this is what kind of breathing and resting easy feels like. And I remember that joy is still possible. And I had forgotten that
Mhm.
joy was possible. And so I think that song is just really about that, like kind of returning back to baseline from being in such a heavy place for so long.
That's neat. Um, so I have an album. It's like my sophomore album follow up to 13th year. It's called Head Above Water. And it really is representational of what you said. It's like even the cover art, there's a sinking ship, and partially it's above water, partially it's submerged. And then it's me as a sailor holding on. And then there's like a piece of the ship where it says independence, holding on to that. And the feeling that I would experience was something similar, was this, man, like I need a moment to breathe. And what does that even look like? And so, I'm forever the optimist. My personality never changed throughout everything. But, when I would have visitors come and they would leave, I found myself, sad. I'm like, man, they're going where I can't go. Um, and I want to go with them and enjoy the freedom that they're going to experience. Um, and it was tough, but one thing I've always said was, keeping myself above the fray, seeing the glass half full and not empty, um, helped me to get through some of the toughest times of my life and continue to help me back. There's something about making your own music. Not only is it cathartic, but when you're going through a troubled time, you don't have to look elsewhere to someone else's music per se. You can always pop in your playlist of your lyrics and say, I remember that moment right there. That was in year 2 or year 15 or whatever, wherever you are. Do you ever experience that?
Um, yeah, I mean, I think my music has, or just my creative endeavors have led me on a really interesting pathway. And so I can look back on when I feel sad or, resentful that, oh man, I wish I was, able to do all these physically active things. I always thought I would be this world traveler, you know,
Hmm.
running around the world, doing all these crazy carefree things. And, that's not going to happen for me. And when I feel resentful that I get to look at what I've grown from my creative endeavors and been like, you know what, I planted this seed of creativity and it's grown. It's taken me, when I was with Axis, we traveled to all different parts of the US, I've taught at Harvard University, I've taught at Stanford University. I applied for a Fulbright scholarship to research kind of teaching inclusive dance at the university level. And that took me down to South America. I'm collaborating with a Taiwanese dance company that's similar to Axis. And so it's allowed me to return to my mother country and work with artists there and write music for them. And last year, I was randomly invited. They found me on Instagram by the Japanese government to teach a dance workshop in Osaka, and they just flew me out there. And so I look back and I think rather than looking at the songs that I wrote, I'm looking at what how this project has opened up doorways to other artistic communities, whether it's in the US, it's in California, it's around the world, and how rich that's made my life. It's connected us. I get to meet all these interesting people, disabled, non-disabled, musicians, dancers, whatever. And I think even though, yes, I can't climb those mountains, I can't run around the world like I thought I was going to, I can still live a really rich life through my art.
Definitely. Um, so, if you could speak, real quick about, in your Spotify bio, you describe your sound as being electro cinematic soul, and I definitely feel that. So, in a few words, what are some of the influences behind your sound and music?
I'm heavily interested by classical music because that is the training I have. I love jazz and the blues. Jimi Hendrix, um, Axis Bold as Love. It just rocked my world. Of when I heard it in high school, I was like, "Whoa! Like what? Why does my soul feel so different now?" And so it's really, yeah. I think starting with Jimi Hendrix, it led me down the pathway of exploring jazz and then soul. And so all those influences, I think, seep in pop music, electronic music, of course, and recently Taiwanese folk music, which I've kind of like Yo Dung was a more recent sort of digging into my heritage and bringing that into my music.
Listen, you are, you know, one of the most interesting people I've had the opportunity to speak with in an interview. Again, I love your music. It really was speaking to me. I was listening to a bunch of it today, and I just was like, man. But like that part where you talk about this, give me something beautiful to quiet my mind. I don't know if you knew that part was going to like hit hard. For people like for me, I love like how you sang the part. I love the lyrics to it, and I'm just like I vibe with it, I groove with it. It is so cool, and I think that you didn't miss the opportunity to climb those mountains and explore different places and whatnot because you're actually doing it. And this, in spite of your injury, you still have found opportunities to talk to people, like you said, whether it's in California, throughout the US, down to South America, all the way into the Asian continent, and going beyond. I imagine keep doing those things. You seem very, very much in tune with helping and inspiring people, even when you don't recognize that it's actually happening. So thank you so much for being a part of this discussion. It's been really cool meeting you.
Thank you for inviting me. It was an honor to be on your show.
So thank you for participating in our More Than Walking video podcast discussion. Stay tuned in and sign in up for the More Than Walking newsletter at morethanwalking.com to learn about the topic we will be covering next and how you can participate. Also, like, comment, and subscribe to our More Than Walking YouTube channel to watch each podcast and click that notification bell so you are alerted when new episodes drop. Follow us wherever you listen to podcasts. Just search for More Than Walking or Super Adaptables. Until then, remain encouraged, stay hopeful, and above all else, keep adapting. Take it easy, Carina.
Thank you. Take care.